Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. Today is Wednesday, so it's Comprehensivist Wednesdays. And I'm delighted to have Angela Cotalesa.
Yes.
Okay, that was good, thanks.
Good job.
And it's going to be CJ interviewing her, and we'll go from there. I'll hand it over to CJ now. CJ.
Yes. Well, I think it's, let's think of it as a group discussion where I might lead and Shrikant, you will be a participant as well. Again, welcome to Comprehensivist Wednesdays, our weekly exploration to advance the practice and appreciation of our comprehensivity, this quality of having a very broad yet a sufficiently thorough understanding of our whole world and its peoples. Some of these events will explore aspects of the pursuit of comprehensivity. Others will explore big issues, big ideas, big theories, cosmology, cosmogony, and the like. But also, I hope some will look at unusual traditions or rare traditions, maybe even small traditions, maybe even something like 2 poems that might seem meaningful to you. Not all of our topics need to go to planetary or cosmic scale. Some of our deepest and most penetrating experiences live at the more humble scope of the too small to be noticed kinds of traditions. Maybe you have one of those, even if you're not a cosmologist, to offer Shrikant and I to consider to build out. The October schedule still empty, and I believe you've got a Sunday slot that.
Yes.
Yeah. So
we are all full till September 30th, but there are 7 days in a week, so Sundays are open.
Sundays are open too. So our topic tonight is comprehensivists in the 21st century with Angela Cotalesa. To introduce Dr. Cotalesa, I'd like to tell the story of how I discovered her work. I started writing the website Collaborating for Comprehensivism on September 30th last year. One of the ways in which I was thinking to historicize this idea of comprehensivism was through the great polymaths of history. So I was on YouTube searching for polymaths and discovered Angela's Polymath's Place, her YouTube channel, where she has 25 excellent introductory videos from her research on polymaths of the 21st century. So Angela, welcome to Comprehensivist Wednesdays.
Thank you for having me.
We want to get the participants talking about your work. And so we plan to divide this into 2 segments. This first segment will be maybe around 20 minutes, followed by Q&A, and we're going to break out into small groups so everyone has a chance to explore these ideas. And then we're going to come back and do another 20-minute discussion with Angela, Shrikant, and I. Another Q&A, another breakout to explore even more on the subject. So this first segment, we're going to try to focus on the development of polymaths. Angela, what is a polymath and how does a person become a polymath?
What is a polymath? Let me start with that first. So it's not, you probably know poly means many, but it's not many mathematics. This is not about mathematics at all, but math is short for manthan in Greek, which means learning. So if you're polymath, you're someone roughly at a high level who has a lot of knowledge about different subjects. There's no agreed upon definition in the scholarly literature yet. This is pretty nascent field of study still. But the forefather of polymathy studies, I consider him the forefather. His name's Robert Bernstein. He has a working definition, and his definition is active engagement in multiple interests or endeavors, integrating vocations with avocations, so work with hobbies, simultaneously or serially across the lifespan. So there's a couple important like logical points, like you're actively engaged and it's multiple things, and it could be work or it could be hobbies. It could be at the same time or concurrently, and it's a lifelong endeavor. So that's how he describes it. Roughly, it's not being an arrow specialist. It's living your life broadly and deeply. And that breadth and depth also, by the way, allows for the possibility to kind of integrate at the intersection of disciplines. So it also touches upon creativity and innovation when you've got this broad toolkit of skills. But of course, we live in an age of specialization where the dominant ideology says, if you want to be successful, don't do any of that stuff. Just specialize in one thing, not two or three. So there's this kind of like, I don't know, like there's this expectation that we want people to live outside the box and think outside the box. But the way our society is set up is so siloed and fragmented. We don't really support this way of being necessarily. Your next question was, how does a person become a polymath?
Yes.
So let me also just say that I did my doctoral dissertation studying modern day polymaths. And so I interviewed highly accomplished people who have expertise in both the arts and the sciences. It's qualitative research called phenomenology. The purpose of phenomenology is to understand lived experiences. So I'm going to share with you some of what I heard from real polymaths in terms of how did they get to be that way. And that was one of the major questions I was looking at is, how'd you get to be this way? Tell me about your upbringing. Tell me about how you are. So one of the questions I asked them was, do you think it's nature or nurture? And obviously what they think doesn't prove it's nature or nurture, but it was interesting to consider what they felt helped them become polymathic or not. And the vast majority of the people I interviewed felt like it was a mix, like you had to have some nature and you had to have some nurture. But what the nurture looked like is where I want to go next. So there was, I think two of the more interesting pieces of data that came out of my research has to do with finances and family functionality, if you will. So you may think, oh, for someone to become a highly accomplished polymathic person, they probably should have a very, very functional upbringing with lots of resources, and that will help them become polymathic, right? That would probably be most people's default assumption. But that's not necessarily what I heard from everybody. I certainly did hear that from some participants, but with finances and family, there was split. So let me explain that a little bit more. Some people, because like I said, they have a lot of financial resources, for example, it could help their polymathy, because what that means is they can pay for an education, they can pay for travel, they can pay for conferences, and they can, basically fund their exploration and fund their curiosities. But what was interesting is that some people become polymathic because they don't have that financial, stash. They can't outsource work. So it forces them to have to figure it out. So this is really interesting, that having a lot of financial resources or really not having much at all could help someone become polymathic either way. The same was true of family functionality. So some people said, my parents were great, I had a wonderful childhood, my family was very functional, very supportive, let me pursue things I was interested in. And those children from those families could become polymathic adults. But some people had very dysfunctional households where there was abuse, drug abuse, divorce, not a very supportive environment, not the ideal environment, I guess. And for those people, they felt motivated to get a ticket out of that. And how do you get a ticket out of that? You get yourself educated, you learn as much as you can, you build your toolkit as wide and broad and deep as possible, so you are better positioned to get yourself out of a difficult situation and make a better future. So these are really interesting, that Little financial resources, a lot of financial resources. Dysfunctional family, functional family. Either way, you could become a polymath. And I think this is really inspiring to hear, because basically it means all of us can do it regardless of our finances or the functionality, I guess, of our childhood. So nature, nurture, the finances, the family part, becoming a polymath, obviously you need to be a curious person. You need to be an open-minded person. There's actually something written about quite a lot in the literature called openness to experience. So people who become polymaths tend to be people high in openness to broad experiences. Curious, of course, learning, self-directed learning is another part of it, because nobody tells a polymath, oh, here's exactly what you have to learn, what I tell you. Like they define and follow their own sort of path to create their own learning journey. So self-directed learning is a part of it, and so is lifelong learning. So that's another hallmark of polymathy, is just a continual hunger for information and learning. And I'll say too, experiences. You know, experiences and learning are slightly different. They're both sort of, yeah, getting information in a way, but they're slightly different. I would say bravery too, because like I said, we live in an age of specialization and nobody is necessarily supporting a person to be polymathic. So these are people who are kind of breaking out of the box. And the box analogy, by the way, came up so much in my interviews. This thinking outside the box, breaking outside the box, being outside of the box. So there's really kind of a rebellious vibe you get from some of these people, because they're not following society's prescription for how they should be. So confidence, bravery. There's also, for some of them, by the way, this kind of imposter syndrome, because they're not deep, narrow specialists in one area only. When they compare themselves to people who have done that with their lives and their work, they can sometimes feel a little insecure, you know, because they've chosen to have breadth instead of, they've chosen to have breadth and depth instead of only depth in one area. But my observation is on the whole, I don't know. I don't think they need to feel imposter syndrome, because they're quite capable, accomplished people, very smart people. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that's a great start. Are any of these conditions necessary, or were you able to distinguish that in any way?
I don't know. I would say having a sense of curiosity and self-directed lifelong learning is necessary to become polymathic. I didn't write about that in my dissertation, but you can't become polymathic unless you're dedicated to learning, because that's what defines, I mean, many learnings, that's what the word means. Now, I will say it can be concurrently or serially, like Robert Ruth Bernstein's definition addressed at the beginning. You don't have to juggle everything at once to be a polymath. That's one way of doing it, but you know, you might work in finance for 10 years and then switch to, I don't know, IT, and you know, and then go on to something else later, and then you might switch, somehow merge IT and finance later and make a, you know, kind of synthesize your interests. So there's no prescription for how this turns. I mean, at the end of the day, this is kind of like a way of living, a way of thinking, a way of being, a way of existing in the world, and there's lots of variety in terms of how that can show up. But the bottom line is these people are curious, self-directed, lifelong learning, and I would say that is necessary to be considered a polymath.
And are there any that are sufficient conditions?
Sufficient, what do you mean by that?
Okay, necessary, you need it. Sufficient, yeah, that when you achieve that, you reach polymathy.
So that's a great question. I want to address this issue of like, how good or how much do you have to be like this to be considered a polymath? And the thing is, I'd like you to walk away from is that it's not like it's yes or no, black and white. There is a gray area, there is range, there is a spectrum of how polymathic a person could be. In fact, Peter Burke, he proposed that there's 4 levels of polymathy. If you'd like, I could just touch upon them real quick. He said that there's passive polymaths. Those are people who read widely, so they're learning widely, but they make their reputation in one discipline. There's the limited polymath, who is active in a small cluster of neighboring disciplines. Next, there's the serial polymath, whose interests gradually shift from one discipline to another over time. And then what he calls, and I kind of think it's funny, the proper polymath is someone like the real high achiever, somebody who continues to work in several fields at the same time and make serious contributions to all of them. So that's his model. There's other ways of looking at it too, but bottom line, this is something that exists on a spectrum. It's not like a yes or no answer, you are or you aren't. In my view, you do not have to be a eminent creative genius like Leonardo da Vinci to consider yourself to be a polymathic person. That's at the far end of the spectrum, but certainly there are lots of people among us who are polymathic in their approach to life and learning, who could consider themselves, if they want to affix that word to their identity, go for it. Say, I'm a polymath, own it.
Shrikant, do you have anything?
Yes. So Angela, how many people did you look at approximately in your research?
So for my phenomenological study, I interviewed 13 people, which is and they were in-depth interviews, and these people were selected with criteria that were identified, and I interviewed people until I reached saturation, which is when I really started hearing the same things over and over again. I wasn't getting new data.
Nice. That's great. So it must have been amazing just kind of diving into lives and thoughts and feelings of these people. So do you find that their development was a continuous progression, or were there like major steps in lives of some of them? Or were there kind of influences, events, ideas that enabled them to move to a next level of polymathy?
Yeah, I would say it was a second example. It wasn't like a steep climb. It was like, a jagged path with zigzags and following kind of what came along. If you'd like, I can share a couple examples of the people I interviewed. I just have my notes here. So someone I called Wendy in my study, she was a math wizard from a young child. And she also had a bachelor's degree in math, a master's degree. I can't remember what her master's degree was in, but it was from an Ivy League school. And she was an executive at a tech company. So that's sort of like the math science side. But she was also a podcast host, a writer, an entrepreneur, a board member for several foundations and councils, an accomplished professional singer and pianist. And she ran triathlons and marathons and traveled the world and was involved in politics. And by the way, lives in Manhattan, like you, Shrikant. So Wendy is an example. And, it's not as if she had all those things just happen at once or in a straight line. They sort of developed over time. Someone I called Levi in my study, he was really cool. He had a bachelor's degree in physics, a PhD in physics. He was a physics researcher and a physics professor. He also was a professional magician, a theater and magic professor, a podcast host. His hobbies include carpentry, cooking, sports, video games, bartending, reading, refereeing women's roller derby, and trivia. And he had tattoos and did like mixed martial arts. And, you might not expect someone with a PhD in physics to also be a magician and like covered in tattoos, but he's making up his own rules to live life in his own terms. Someone I called Sarah had a master's degree in business. She had 3 master's degrees, just to set the tone here. Business, architectural acoustics, which is a type of engineering. She was the former CEO and co-founder of an organization that puts together events exploring the intersection of arts, technology, and entrepreneurship, and she developed apps. So that's kind of like the sciencey side. And on the artsy side, she had a bachelor's degree in music from an Ivy League university, a master's degree also in vocal performance. She was a former professional opera singer, and her hobbies included music directing, various sports like field hockey and tennis, and also acting. I could give other examples, but those are just 3 highlights, just real people I interviewed.
So we're going to go into breakouts in a few minutes, and we're going to be asking participants to talk about the development of polymaths, maybe what aspects of the development is easiest, what aspects might be most challenging, and so on. Would you, Angela, maybe give a quick summary of the development of polymaths that they might consider as they explore how a person becomes a polymath?
Yeah, I would just encourage you to think of both positive experiences and difficult experiences as things that could have helped you become polymathic, because that's what I heard from the people I interviewed, is it was both like difficulties and easy sort of supportive opportunities that could help them become the broad-minded, multifaceted, multidimensional people they are today.
Okay, so Shrikant, you've got rules and I've got some questions for our breakouts.
Yes, let me go through the rules. We have 4 rules we have used in our meetup for the past 4 years that make possible amazingly complex conversations between people with varied opinions. So number 1, you know, be in the Zoom version of it is that you raise your hand when you speak, when you want to speak. You can do that in breakout room like this or in Zoom. Okay, so that way everybody gets a turn to speak. But in a small breakout room, you can do it in a much more free form. So that's number 1. Number 2, keep on topic. In the breakout room, we have a specific topic that CJ is going to talk about. Just keep to that topic because everybody has come to discuss that. That is the core of what everybody is here for. Number 3, be brief. There's all kinds of interesting stuff that other people have to say. So let them speak as you want to speak as well. And number 4, feel free to disagree with anybody on anything. Be very candid, but do so courteously. Okay, so those are the 4 rules. CJ.
Yeah, so the question we'd like you to consider is the subject of the development of polymaths, how a person becomes a polymath. And because we're sort of an advocacy Comprehensivist Wednesday, we'd like you to consider what aspects of the development of a polymath, as Angela presented it, or as you think about it, might be easiest for you to practice, and which aspects that we've been discussing might be most challenging. And, just any comments and thoughts you want to share with each other about the development of polymaths.
Okay, and I want to give you a heads up on what is coming up after this. So after this breakout room, we're going to come back and we're doing one more segment with Angela. We're going to have one more set of breakout rooms, and then we'll all come together and everybody will get to share their takeaways. Okay, so that's the plan. I'm starting the breakout rooms now.
Okay, we're back.
Yes, everybody's back.
Everyone's back. Great. Okay, so hopefully everyone gained something from that. The next segment, we're going to explore the experience of polymaths. So Angela, for the experience of polymaths, what do you mean by that? And I might break it out as in the benefits and challenges of being a polymath, or is that the right, or how would you structure that?
Yeah, I think the pros and cons of it, I could absolutely share based on the research I did. Maybe I'll start with the cons first so I can end on a positive note. So explaining socially, whether it's with friends, family, or employers, explaining your polymathy could be very difficult. That's what I heard from the participants. For example, participants might say that their parents were supportive of them exploring and learning broadly as children, but then when they became adults, you needed to focus narrowly and specialize and get a job kind of thing. They can be seen as being uncommitted flighty, distracted. They also can frequently feel misunderstood because they don't necessarily fit any stereotypes. They're not predictable. They're these unique combinations of people that you might not have met someone like that before. So it's hard for them to feel understood. And actually, here's a point I want to emphasize too, is that so many, a strength of being a polymath is because you've got this broad toolkit, you've had lots of experience and exposure, lots of learning, is that you frequently can, if you meet a new person, you can find something to identify with. You can find something in common, you can find something to talk about because you've just got a broader kind of menu to find something to connect with people. So there's this sort of juxtaposition of that along with the fact that they don't frequently feel understood. So they can sort of connect and understand, but they don't typically feel very well understood by others. It's kind of a burden of being a polymath. I also heard from people that because they've got this, you know, if you're the physicist magician with tattoos and all these weird hobbies, like, you know, refereeing roller derby and being a bartender and all the other things that Levi did, like when you meet somebody, they say, so tell me about yourself. Like, what do you say? How do you explain yourself? So there was this real through line of like self-censorship that a lot of polymaths told me about, where they didn't really feel like they could share about themselves freely and openly, and the kind of burden of having to hide parts of yourself and let it out in little bits, and the difficulties with that. Obviously, career life, when, you know, applying for jobs, what do they teach you when you apply for jobs? Make your resume tell the story of specialization, just like the job advertisement. So you have to even sort of hide your capabilities when you apply for most jobs, because that's what organizations tend to be looking for, is deep specialists. And they don't even really have an awareness most of the time about the other way of being and working and thinking. So career choice, career changes, you know, career in general can be difficult for polymaths. A lot of polymaths actually become entrepreneurs because they don't feel like they can use their talents fully in an organization. And that's frustrating. When you're highly intelligent, you want to be able to use your skill set and use your intelligence. And so, you know, a lot of them become entrepreneurs, and that's fraught with its own risks and challenges, becoming an entrepreneur. One of the polymaths I interviewed, by the way, felt like because she was so capable, her organization didn't know how to stop tasking her. Like, she could do so many things, they just kept piling more on her plate. So there's this mix of like some polymaths feeling like I'm not being able to leverage my full skill set. And then one of my participants was like, please stop tasking me so much. Just because I can do it doesn't mean I should be doing all of that stuff. So those are some of the cons. You know, there's an underappreciation, I would say, too. A lack of awareness is a real challenge. Should I move on to the benefits of it?
Sure.
All right. So the benefits of being a polymath is you get to have a sense of freedom. Like, you're not stifling yourself into this little box that society sort of tells you would be better for you to do. So there's this real sense of like, no, I'm living on my own terms according to my own rules. And that feels nice for most polymaths. Also, feeling authentic. Like, I get to be this hodgepodge of experiences and skills and self-author and curate my own existence in a way that feels authentic to me, as opposed to sort of trying to squish and mold myself into the expectations of others. So feeling like you can live your life in an authentic way is a good thing. Creativity, this is a big deal. So for polymaths, this is the superpower of polymaths, is when you have this broad toolkit, you can make unique combinations, you can make connections, you can do analogical thinking and say, oh, there's this approach, there's this idea, I had this spark over here, I'm going to apply it over there. And because of that, because of, you know, a lot of the innovations that would have occurred within silos have already happened. Where the big payoffs are now is at the intersection of disciplines. And so polymaths who have multidisciplinary expertise are in a great position to be creative and innovative, which is very valuable. I'm hoping organizations will catch on to that. If organizations want creativity and innovation, like, get some polymaths on your team. I observed in the people I interviewed also this like clear sense of bravery and almost like rebellion bravery. Like, I'm going to live how I want to live. I'm not going to just follow a standard path because of the pressure, the societal pressures to do that. So living outside of the box, thinking outside of the box, breaking outside of the box are all things that, you know, it's kind of a benefit of being a polymath, is that sense of like breaking out. I mentioned it earlier, but the ability to kind of find common ground with people that you meet and being able to connect with almost anybody is as a benefit of being a polymathic person. Having that large toolkit to solve problems. Some people I interviewed were like, okay, I didn't have money growing up, so I had to learn how to do all these things. And now it just pays off because I can, you know, fix a plumbing problem at my house or like repair a car or whatever. And so it sort of adds some efficiency in their lives because they have more capability. They're not so dependent upon others. They don't have to outsource tasks quite as much. So just being able to solve problems for themselves instead of being dependent on others, and also being able to solve problems creatively, as I mentioned. And I would say, you know, we're each unique creatures. Like, none of us will ever, there's never going to be another you at that place and that time in this, you know, exact combination of the universe. And so there's something really wonderful, I think, about recognizing the onlyness that exists in each of us, and then actually like not just recognizing it, but kind of owning it, like stepping into it fully. So feeling like I get to be unique. I get to be special in my own way. Everybody gets to be unique and special in their own way. So I would say that's another benefit of being a polymath and owning your polymathy is, you know, just really owning your specialness, and being the creator of yourself. You know, we're each born into this world from our parents. We have a certain genetic inheritance. There's things that we can't change that are immutable about who we are. Our race, our sex, usually our gender, you know, there's certain things we can't change about ourselves. But what I love about the beauty of polymaths is that in a way they give birth to themselves. You know, they decide, I want to go down that path, and they self-author their own story rather than sort of inheriting and living out a story that someone else wrote for them. So those are some of the pros and cons of being a polymath. Do you guys have any other observations?
Well, we're going to open it up to Q&A soon. Is there anything else about the experience of polymaths that you would add that maybe doesn't fit on the axis of benefits and challenges?
One thing I think is interesting to point out is social identity theory says that we get our sense of identity because we can find in-groups with we identify. So I can identify with white women because that's what I am. And also we can disidentify with out-groups. So I can say, oh, I'm not a black man, I'm a white woman. And so that's how I can get my sense of this, of being a white woman. But what was interesting is so many of the polymaths I interviewed like, I would ask, like, how did you realize you're a polymathic person? And the way that almost all of them realize, oh, I'm a polymath, is because they just never really felt like they fit in those other groups entirely. Like they just couldn't find the place to fit in. And of course, each polymath is so unique that you probably will never find someone with the exact combination you have. But in terms of what it's like, the experience of being a polymath, there's, like I said, there's this sense of like having a hard time finding community and being really understood, which is part of what I'm trying to help with, by the way. It's why I've named my Facebook group and my YouTube channel and my soon-to-be website Polymath's Place, because I'm trying to make a place to build community where people can feel like they're not so alone, where even if I don't find the exact replica of my unique combination, at least we're talking about polymathy openly, like it's on the table, and we're recognizing that it's a way of being, and actually it's quite a natural way of being. So anyway, I guess that's another observation I'll make in terms of what is it like actually being one, is just the sense of identity and finding community can be challenging.
Shrikant, do you have any follow-ups, or should we go to Q&A with the whole group?
No, I do want to make a couple of comments and follow up. Angela, I think your description of what a polymath is like was amazing. I think we need to distinguish between outside and inside, in the sense that there are, all the fields, etc., that people have created. That's a creation of society.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the way we are inside is actually quite different from that. So, for example, I'm committed to being a polymath, but I don't think that as a I don't think of it as polymath. It doesn't feel to me that I'm looking at different fields. I'm simply curious about the world, about myself, about people, and I let my mind go wherever it goes.
Yep.
And try to integrate everything I can. So it seems a far more simpler way of being to me. And as far as inside goes, I mean, there are just tremendous benefits, because you're kind of engaging your full brain. You are, it's just, leveraging the full glory of what you have. And also when you're interacting with people, the point that you made, that in a sense, community is hard, but in a sense, community is very easy, because you have commonality with everybody.
True.
So I think at an internal level, I really liked your description of how you describe, what it feels like to be a polymath. And that's something that's very special.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
and the good thing is that, here in this meetups, that's what we do. So it's wonderful to see, as we'll see. I want to open it up to questions. So we'll have, many people asking questions about this. So folks, we have 4 rules for questions. Type exclamation mark if you want to ask questions. Number 2, keep on topic. We're discussing, the challenges and advantages of being a polymath. Number 3, be brief. And number 4, be courteous. So I'm going to start with Joe, Moira, and Michael next. Joe, go ahead. Just a second. Let me do one thing. I need to unmute everybody. Joe, go ahead.
Hey, thanks guys for presenting this evening. CJ, great interview. Angela, I really enjoyed it. One of the things that actually you had mentioned about how society actually encourages us to become more specialized. And do you feel that that may be changing with things like automation, where we're having to reinvent ourselves in careers more times than we've ever have before? So you may be reinventing yourself in a career every 4 years, 6 years, whatever it may be, where in the past you would have a career for maybe 20 years, which kind of rewards the polymath model a little bit more. Do you think we're moving towards more of a polymath type of lifelong learning model versus a, more siloed approach that we have in the past?
Absolutely. I think technology has been a real game changer. And as tech takes over more and more grunt work, it really sort of begs the question, like, what unique value can humans add? And I would say that the unique human value that humans can add is by having a big picture, like seeing the big picture, being able to make connections and synthesize, innovate. And tech can't do that. So I think as tech does more of the grunt work, we are going to be it's going to be necessary for us to do more uniquely human tasks at work. And I also just feel like at the individual level, a lot of people are just rebelling against this sort of box, that society may say, get in. And a lot of people are just naturally at the individual level not doing it. So I think we're at the beginning of a real boom towards an appreciation for polymathy.
So next up is going to be Moira, Dave, Jean, Michael, and Bob next. Moira, go ahead.
Hi, Angela. Wonderful topic. I accidentally came here, but I'm really glad I did. I do find with being this lifelong curious learner, there's two things that kind of strike me is that I'm always seeking truth and the best understanding in any issue or conversation. I seem to prioritize that over any kind of relating, you know, manners, all of that stuff. When I was developing and finding I had an overemphasis on facts and trying to arrive at sort of I'm a little bit combative when I'm investigating things and I want to arrive at truth. I'm wondering if that's a feature of polymaths as well. They're always digging in to try and get to, anyway. And then the other thing is that it combines with introversion and extroversion. As an introverted polymath, I really don't mind that I don't find community. I find enough extra polymaths to be friends with, and I really want hardcore information and lots of exploration and stretch in my conversation. So I don't really just get together with people just to get together with people in a way. So I was wondering if that came up in your study as well.
I would say that there definitely is a flavor of sort of being a little bit antagonistic and being a critical thinker, being kind of rebellious. I'm not sure I'm finding the right word here, but there is definitely a flavor of that. And I mean, I guess it comes down to being a critical thinker. And so if that means asking questions or engaging in debate, like that is a very, very polymathic thing to do. Introvert, extrovert, there was no trend I saw. I wasn't really digging into that question, but I think there are polymathic introverts, there are polymathic extroverts. There's both. I think that's probably an area for future study to kind of figure out what kinds of roles are more suited, like what kind of polymaths are better suited to leadership roles or research roles or whatever. And that's where introvert, extrovert might come into play, but no one that I know of has studied that just yet.
Next up is Dave.
Yeah, thanks, Yukon. And Angela, thanks very much. Your personality or profile sketches were quite fascinating to me because I always, enjoy general knowledge, but those descriptions, it almost seemed like, someone just has achieved like 5 or 6 different things. It's like, well, that's not enough. Now I need to run the marathon. So I'm curious, like, it's like be a self-esteem question. And the other thing is like the guy that was a physicist and bartender and magician and covered himself with tattoos. I wonder if maybe you lose track of who you are. Do any of those things resonate to you? But thanks again.
Lose track of who you are. I think a polymath is never fixed. They're always becoming a new version of themselves. So maybe they are losing track of their old self as they step into a new self, or step into one of their multiple selves. Can you have multiple selves in one self? I think you can. Self-esteem. So that's a really interesting question. I didn't dig into that too much, but I have wondered for people who are sort of insecure, is becoming a highly accomplished polymath a way to prove I'm good enough, I'm smart enough? Watch. I've wondered that. I don't have the answer. It could be for some of them that's the case.
Okay, folks, so please keep your questions short. Next up is going to be Jean, Michael, Bob, and Joel. Jean, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So usually don't come to this meeting, and I'm so glad I did. It just explains so much, everything about myself. It's like I totally listening to myself, and I become an entrepreneur 5 years ago, and I love it because my job changing every day. I do like small condo remodeling to large mixed use, mixed use medical building. So it's just fascinating. So it's so great to finally understand myself better because, I found, in my Instagram, I see people sharing food every single day. Other people share watercolor every single day. And I share like cooking one day, watercolor another day, my building design another day, my kids the next day. And my sister said, why you change so much? Everybody else like consistent with one thing. So like, that's who I am, So it's just fascinating. So my question is like, I recently found out my kids may have ADHD, and I read a book called Hunter in a Farmer's World. And it's fascinating. And I realized, the hunter who are the ADHD people who like constantly looking for new information. And I think that may also relate to polymath in some way. Actually, after I read that book, I realized I don't have ADHD. Or they totally misunderstand the word now. They make it negative. And also during the Renaissance day, everybody is multi-task, multi-skilled. I think the modern society make everybody specialized, and people are not like that. They were forced to be like that. Mm-hmm. And it's not as human development, human being is not fully developed in that way. I want to hear what you think.
I completely agree. I mean, I think that the natural way of being a human being is being broad and curious and having lots of different capabilities, that is our natural way. But in the Victorian era, information blew up. There was a lot more. And so for the sake of being efficient and trying to manage it all, we broke up knowledge into little bits and said, okay, we're going to each know more and more about less and less. We're going to look down and deep instead of looking up and around and, looking down. So, I think technology may switch things back the other way, though, where we're going to see a lot more demand and appreciation for polymathic approaches. But, so often when I talk to people, a lot of people, this resonates with them. They're like, oh, finally, I have a word for how I live my life. And that, to me, that just underscores that this is a very natural way of being and living life. It's just society's expectations have been, oh no, just become a narrow specialist. And that's what you have to do to be a professional and to be successful. And it's a lie. We each get to live our lives the way we choose. To the ADHD comment, I think there are a lot of polymaths I've met who have told me that I have ADHD and I'm polymathic, and I think those can frequently go hand in hand. As far as I know, there haven't been any studies looking at that. Is ADHD over labeled on people? Probably. Is it helpful? Probably not. So I just encourage you to continue doing your thing and living life on your own terms, even if that means you have lots of different interests. To me, that's how you live life to the fullest. That's how you live life to the fullest. Sorry, Angela. Talking too much.
No, please. I just wanted, next one is Michael, Bob, Joel, Anthony, and Stefan. Michael, go ahead.
Yes. So thank you, Angela. Thank you, Shrikant. I'm just, it occurred to me that polymaths probably have a more optimal relationship with time and their environments as far as how they relate to both of those. I'm just wondering if you noticed any habits that those in your study or that polymaths historically have shared, be it sleep-related, dietary, study, reading, maybe other brain boosting or flow causing activities and triggers.
Yeah. So this came up quite a lot in my interviews because, of course, if you're a polymathic person with lots of interests and passions and capabilities, maybe even multiple concurrent careers going at the same time, or career in school and family, like I did when I wrote my dissertation, time management is a legit concern. And so a lot of the really successful polymaths were able to kind of juggle and manage their schedules, and that's what helped them achieve. Sleep came up quite a bit, and I heard a mix of some polymaths saying, I hardly need any sleep. I can function on very little, just keep up with my passions and my work. Sleep can wait till later, till I'm dead. And then other people were, like, I get a good 8 hours a night and I need that, and I still can be a superwoman and juggle tons of things. So there was no consistent theme in terms of sleep. Reading came up quite a lot. Polymaths read. They learn and they read. And of course, I found also researchers in terms of brain health that obviously continuing to learn improves brain plasticity, reading, staying active. Like, the polymathic ways of living your life are really good for your longevity and your health, which is probably a feedback loop, because if you remain healthy, you probably become more, you can explore your polymathy more. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Time management, sleep. Of course, being a self-directed learner can add certain efficiencies. The internet also came up, by the way. I'll add that as one final thought here, is that because of the internet, because of modern technology, it's so easy if you need information to find it. And so that adds a certain level of efficiency because information's at your fingertip or in your back pocket, basically.
Thank you. Next up is Bob, Joel, Anthony, Stefan, and Christie. Bob, go ahead.
I'm trying to understand what underlies the motives of a polymath. Now, this may be a difficult question, but there are many personalities, and I'm wondering if the ENTP or the ENFP might be highly polymath oriented, in the sense that they lead in external intuition. So that might, if you ever meet one of these two, either the ENTP or ENFP, they are driven to be all over the place with their external intuition. I wonder if that.
Yeah, you know, it would be so interesting to see if there are any Myers-Briggs types that are more represented among polymaths. That has also not been studied. Bottom line, there's a whole lot that hasn't been studied with polymaths and a lot more research that needs to be done. With the E and the I, introvert, extrovert, I don't think we would find any trends. S and P, are they more intuitive or more fact-based? I don't know. I think it could go either that way. Feeling or thinking, I would think there's a bias towards thinking with polymaths because they're so learning oriented. So I think they'd probably be more on the T rather than the F, so the thinking more than the feeling. And then the perceiving or judging, so more going with the flow or being more structured. I think they could be both. I think the people who would be highly accomplished polymaths would probably tend to be more J because they'd be able to, you know, stay on task, be organized, get things done. But I'm making this up. I don't know for sure. I think the motive underlying a lot of polymaths, I'll see, just to get back to that point you said in the beginning, I think what underlies a lot of people's blossoming into their polymathy is a real desire to self-actualize, to be their best self. So some of us feel that drive more than others, but I think polymaths on the whole, based on the sense I got from interviewing them, I think a lot of them have a real drive to make the most out of this lifetime, you know, do it well. So I think that's part of what underlies it too.
Let me just quickly add, I can't resist this, so I'm going to add this. I'm a big fan of Carl Jung, on whose psychological functions this entire MBTI thing is based. Yep. And he was a polymath, and he strongly believed that all of us have all these functions.
Yes.
And it's just a question of how good we are at it, which ones we decide to invest in, and things like that. So we're going to do a full meetup on Carl Jung and this Sunday at 2:30.
Oh, nice. Awesome.
So the next one up is Joel. Joel, go ahead.
Hi, I'm wondering if you did if you know of any research or you did any tests connecting polymathy to intelligence as measured by IQ tests or other similar measurements of fluid intelligence.
So that has not been studied exactly in that way. I will say that it should be studied. I mean, we should sort of come up with a way, and Michael Araki, who's here, I think, is working on a way to measure trait polymathy. And of course we can measure IQ, but no study has been done. There's a lot of studies that haven't been done on, in fact, my dissertation was the first doctoral level and still only doctoral level dissertation written on polymaths in the world, as far as I know. So that just goes, I'm not saying that to give myself credit. I'm just saying that shows you how understudied this field is. And part of it, by the way, is because in academia, you are rewarded for becoming hyper-specialized. And what I did was I became hyper-specialized in not being hyper-specialized. So I was sort of rebellious to write a dissertation on that. But back to the IQ, I will say Robert Root Bernstein has written some articles, for example, about Nobel Prize laureates that showed that people who have won Nobel Prizes tend to be more polymathic and more diversified than their less eminent peers. So I don't know if you can say Nobel Prize laureates must have a higher IQ. I would assume they probably do on average than people who haven't gotten Nobel Prizes. But that's a little something that came up for me when you asked your question is, you know, Nobel Prize laureates tend to be more polymathic.
And you can make that assumption. That was studied separately.
Okay, got it.
Okay, next up is Joel from Canada. Joel, are you there?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Shrikant. And thank you very much, Angela. This is really quite interesting, and I was fortunate to discover this just before it started, so I was able to watch some of your YouTube videos. I think my questions have mainly been answered. I was mostly interested in psychological types, and several people have raised that, and I take it it's a field still to be studied. But I'm wondering, your sample size seems to be relatively small. What were the criterion for selecting people, or was it just among the pool that you had available?
My criteria at a high level were that they had to have expertise in both the arts and the sciences. So someone who was quite accomplished in both the arts and the sciences. I think the age range I required was 30 to 65. So someone who's sort of in the prime years of their career. And they had to identify as being a polymathic person. Maybe they didn't use that word, but if you describe what a polymath is, they could say, yes, that's who I am. So those were the criteria. I interviewed 13 people. That's actually fairly standard when using phenomenology, and it's the point at which I reached saturation, which is when in phenomenological research you begin not getting new information. So that they were 13 in-depth interviews with highly accomplished polymaths.
Thank you. Next up is Anthony. Anthony, go ahead. Anthony, you need to unmute yourself.
Sorry, I knew that. Okay, so I'm wondering about the frequency, whether they have EQ, whether if they were to quit what they're doing and become a bottle opener or something like that for the rest of their life, how's that tied up with their identity? Is there an issue there? Because if identity is produced by society, then I think it would, but I don't think it is. I think it's produced right out of the womb. You see two kids, and one is like, has one personality, one has a completely different personality. My sister and I, for example. And then and that's about it, I think.
Can you tell me what you meant by frequency? Do you mean like what percentage of the population?
Exactly.
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the frequency. And of course, there's a range of how polymath. So would you only include eminent creative geniuses in the frequency, or would you include people who are sort of like on the lower end of the polymathic spectrum? I don't know the answer to that. I would venture a guess, knowing again, there's a spec. I mean, I think it's a fairly, you know, at least 10% of our population, I think, has this tendency to want to be polymathic. I'm totally making that up, and I have no data to support it. Okay. EQ. No study has been done on it to see if polymaths are more EQ, emotionally intelligent. I think an argument can be made for why, if they are living in a world where it's difficult to be a polymath, that may encourage them to sort of develop more emotional awareness and sensitivities, given they have, you know, challenges and benefits of being polymathic in the modern world. But no studies have been done, and I don't have any data about are polymaths more emotionally intelligent or not. I will say some of them did report to me that they felt they were emotionally intelligent, but that is what it is. Personality and identity. Can you repeat what you were wondering about that? Oh, you're on mute, Anthony.
Anthony, you need to unmute yourself again.
I decided to use my left hand tonight. And then right hand, I can go for the pen. Left hand will do the mouse. But anyway, yeah, like if they have their identity tied up in being a polymath, if they say, yes, I'm a polymath, blah, 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 because I think that's a phenomenal thing. And I think people should be bragging about it instead of hiding it, but that's just me. So, but here's the thing, like, let's say they quit polymath. They say, I'm tired of reading. I'm tired of, you know, trying to figure out quantum mechanics or whatever, you know, it's blah. You know, and then they just become like a person with no goals. Somebody just wants to live their life, find happiness without finding another polymath. And so what's going to happen to them? How's that change of identities or statues? What's the future for that person?
Yeah, I don't know. I think polymaths, you know, they can be polymathic because they juggle lots of things at once, or because they have different phases. When taken as a whole, you can see that they were polymathic over the lifespan. I would venture to guess, actually, Robert Root Bernstein, who is, I consider, the forefather of polymathy studies, had once suggested to me that as a next study, that I do another phenomenological study on retired people who were kind of slowing down, and compare people who were in retirement, slowing down the pace of their, you know, pace of life. People comparing retired people who were polymathic in their lifespan over the decades prior versus people who were very narrow specialists, and see, like, how do they adjust to retired life. His guess was that people who had been broader, had more tools in their toolkit, had different parts of their identity, might adjust better to retired life while maybe maintaining some hobbies or something like that. Or maybe they would just be more able to flex as their identity shifted, because they would have gotten very used to that, being a polymathic person. If all you ever knew was my job is accounting, and then suddenly that's gone because you had been a narrow specialist and now you're retired, like, that could be a very difficult transition. So I think just logically it makes sense that polymathic people might transition better into older age, even with the brain health concerns. You know, having been more active intellectually could help them as they age, to age a little bit better. But again, an area that hasn't been studied, that needs to be.
Thank you. Thank you, Angela. So we're going to take 3 last quick questions and quick answers, so that we'll have time for both one more breakout session and then the really important takeaway session. So it's going to be Stefan, Christie, and Captain next. Stefan, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
I'm going to say 2 questions. One is, you were talking about automating the basic stuff, so we need people that can integrate it more and more polymaths. Professional group was talking about how you need more people with more judgment, but if you eliminate the lower level jobs by automating them, how do you get people with judgment and experience?
Okay.
Any thoughts on that?
Go ahead. Go ahead, Angela. So we'll just do 1 question per person. We're trying to keep it short.
I don't really have a whole lot of thoughts on that. I mean, is the fact that, I don't know, I have an Outlook calendar that helps me be more efficient and sort of automate some of my record keeping in a more efficient, more modern way. Does that somehow make me weaker because I'm not dependent upon old paper versions? I'm making up this example, obviously, as I go along. I don't know that we need to master grunt work in order to own our polymathy. I don't know.
Okay. Thank you. Next up is Christie.
Hello, Angela.
Hey, Christie.
Hello. First
Good
of
to see
all,
you.
thank you for, I don't know, kind of saving my life.
Goodness.
Just in a way, like giving me a framework to think about who I have been for my entire life. So I just want to thank you. It's the first time I've seen you in person and talked to you. And also Michael, who's on here.
Yes.
So thank you, guys. I know we talk a lot on LinkedIn.
Thank you.
But you know, it's really awesome. I was introduced to you personally in your thesis by Dr. Robert Root Bernstein. And but I do a lot of research too. And my 2 brothers, I have one brother who is clearly autistic. The other brother has got something else going on. And so my question to you is, do you believe that there could be a characteristic of our white matter in our brain, which is basically the electrical circuits that can cause either polymathy or autism? So it just seems to me that there's a very close connection between the way that a polymath can combine information and make more of it. There's a very close connection between that and how an autistic person can only operate with a pattern. So I was just wondering if you'd ever thought about that.
It's entirely possible. And I know there's a whole field of study called 2E, that stands for twice exceptional. It means that you're exceptional because you have something like autism, and you're exceptional also because you're a savant in something. And so, you know, it's totally possible that, you know, maybe that channel is somehow related. I don't know, but it seems like it definitely could be, you know, it could be there could be something there. And I think more largely, you know, we don't really understand, there's so much we don't yet understand about how our biology creates us, you know, how it writes us in a way, to some extent, not completely, but and it's certainly not something I'm expert in, but I think, yeah, I think you're onto something there, perhaps.
Okay, last question is from Captain Future. Captain
Hello,
Future,
Angela.
are you there?
Hey, Michael.
Yeah. We were talking about before I think it was in May, about different titles we use, and there's been various use. And I know you dislike the term multipotentialite. I don't like it either, but I've been talking to a lot of people since then about different titles we use for this type of polymath and generalist. And have you been doing some more thinking about this? Is polymath the way to go? Can people identify and really understand what a polymath is, or is this the name we should use generally?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I first discovered the word polymath, I resisted it because I thought, I've never heard of it, and it doesn't sound like a word people use. But then through my own journey, I felt like it was the best option we had. I really don't like the word multi-potentialite either, because I feel like basically it implies just you have lots of potential. Well, everybody has lots of potential. We all have potential. It doesn't mean you've actually acted on it or pursued it at all. So I wish there was a better word. I've often thought, like, can I come up with a word? Can I come up with a word? I mean, so I've heard some people just call it being a multi, just being a multi. A multi what? I don't know. A Renaissance person, of course, that's a good one. I don't like jack of all trades because that has this sort of negative master of none connotation that goes with it. I know CJ's over there saying, well, you're a comprehensivist. That's the word we should use, right, CJ? This is Comprehensivist Wednesday. I don't know. I use polymath. I think it's the best of the options. But you have a lot of fun words, Captain Future, that you use. I think it's in the chat up here, right? Weavers, mavericks, navigators, telefusionists, edgewalkers, sense makers, neo-generalists, wisdom seekers, multi-potentialites, systems thinkers, stardust explorers, evolutionary leaders, opportunity ambassadors. Those are really fun.
I also like Captain Future for that. Next up is CJ. What are we going to do in the breakout rooms?
Yes. So I want to ask Angela a question to get onto a focus for the breakout. The breakout question is exploring this second segment, which we've all forgotten now that we've had these wonderful questions, the experience of polymaths, which address the advantages and challenges of being a polymath. So Angela, for everyone's benefit, could you briefly summarize the advantages and challenges and which comprises the experience of being a polymath, so that in the breakouts, everyone will have it queued up to explore?
Sure. Well, I think, you know, as we talked about, there are pros and cons of being a polymath. You know, some of the difficulties are you can be seen as being uncommitted. You know, you can be misunderstood. You can feel like you have to censor yourself. Even when you apply for jobs, having to censor yourself. Career decisions can be very difficult. You know, entrepreneurial alternatives can be difficult. The pros, the freedom, the authenticity, the creativity, the sense of being brave, living outside the box, being able to find common ground with other people, having a large toolkit, feeling unique, like you get to be a special, unique version of yourself. You know, I guess the final thought I'll say before we go into the breakout room is a lot of the difficulties of being a polymath are only difficult because of the context in which we exist, because we're in an age of specialization. So a lot of the difficulties, if we just shifted our appreciation for polymathy, a lot of the difficulties would go away. You know, the storytelling of it, the social aspects of it, the you know, employment aspects of it. Like, it doesn't always have to be that way if we could change our culture and our narrative about what being a polymath means. And so I'll leave you with that thought.
All right, CJ, shall we start? Go ahead.
Yeah, Shrikant, did you want to review the rules again, or you've done it twice?
I've done it twice. I
Okay.
think everybody knows them.
So everyone knows the rules. You know the questions to explore the experience of polymaths and to explore our topic. Try to engage all the participants in your breakout rooms so that everyone can explore it a little bit further.
One question, CJ. It's 10:37. I recommend that doing the breakout rooms for 20 minutes. So we'll have about 20 minutes. Okay. Very
That
good.
sounds good. Excellent.
Okay, I'm setting it up for 20 minutes. All right. I'm starting the breakout rooms now. Welcome back, folks. So now it's a time for takeaways. Everybody gets 2 to 3 minutes to talk about what they're walking away with from this meetup. We're not trying to summarize what happened in the breakout rooms. We're trying to see what are we walking away with. All right, so if you don't want to share your takeaways, that's perfectly fine. You can go ahead and type in skip, and I will skip you. If I call on you by mistake, just remain muted. I'll go to the next person, all right? So let me start with, it's going to be Maxine, Joseph, and Marvin. Maxine, go ahead. Let me make sure that you can unmute yourself.
I
go ahead.
unmuted. Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Okay, so it was a very interesting session, and I thank you very much, but it made you, it brought to mind perhaps things that you don't want to think about. How much knowledge do you need in each field to become, you know? And also, it's very isolating, and I brought this up in a group because you are in different groups with different sets of people that like different things, and they are not interested in your other groups. So you really have to keep quiet, kind of hide that you're in some other group. I mean, okay, I'm here, but, and I said to the people that maybe tomorrow I would be in bull riding or something like that. Well, those people don't want to hear about this. I have to hide it. Not that I go bull riding, you know, or each group has their own thing. And so you really don't fit into anything. And after a while, you kind of give up and think, oh, do I want to be bothered with anybody? So that is the difficulty that I have to now look into. And I didn't have to look into it before this evening because I didn't realize that it bothered me so much.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Maxine. Great observation. Next up is Joseph, followed by Marvin. Joseph, go ahead. Oh, you want to skip? That's fine. Next up is Marvin, followed by Captain Future. Marvin, you need to unmute yourself. Go ahead.
Okay. Anyway, found the meeting very interesting. It's a very interesting topic. I wonder, of course, how many polymaths actually self-identify, and I don't know the answer, and maybe that's something to come to it. I think of myself more as suffering from an information imperative. You know, where I get interested in something and I get into it, and of the many, many things I'm interested in, and there are lots of them, there are a handful, I would say, that I'm at a very high level, and others I spent some time in, it was interesting, and I was gone. I do have an admission though. I found it very interesting and I selected the topic for a reason, but I'm actually here with another motive. I run a lot of Zoom sessions locally in East Lansing, mostly for some college types, professors at MSU. And I want to get into larger groups, and I was wondering how one is handled.
We can talk. Yeah, we can talk. I'll be happy to talk to you.
Right, and I learned a lot.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and
thank you. I'll be in touch. Next up is Captain Future, Maritza, and Ryan.
Yeah, thanks. My first time here, and I saw the link from Angela. And it's really interesting to listen in on the concept of being a polymath, something I've been thinking daily on for the last couple of years. So it's really interesting to hear different perspectives here, and I'll see if I can come back. This is, of course, very late for me who live in Sweden, 5 a.m. now in the morning.
Oh, okay. Then I would recommend we do sessions on Sundays at 2:30 p.m., which is specially designed for Europeans because that's a convenient time for Europe. These we choose 9 p.m. because it is convenient for East Coast, West Coast in the US. But our weekend sessions, lots of people from Europe attend. So I would recommend those.
Yeah, cool.
Okay, thank you. Next up is Maritza, Ryan, and Lisa. Maritza?
Takeaway here, I was fascinated to hear Angela's take on Polymath. I was fascinated ever since I first heard you speak about it at the first Comprehensivist Wednesday. And takeaway from here today is just really interesting for me to hear other people's perspectives on it. And it gives me an introspection on some things that I may do. And it's like, oh, wait, could this possibly be something I'm doing? And hey, maybe it doesn't mean that I can't stand to focus on one thing at a time. Maybe there's something good here. So that was interesting. Thank you.
Next up is Ryan. Ryan, go ahead.
I think I learned a lot about this word today, right from discovering it to meeting people who have perspective and opinion on this. And I think I have an understanding. I thought everyone is a polymath because I never knew people are not like this, but but now I can understand, and maybe I'll have more empathy for people who don't think this way. And yeah, I think this was very informative. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Next up is Nathan, Christie, and Moira. Nathan, go ahead.
So first time I've actually made it through more than a couple of minutes of one of these. So I'm glad I got. And of course, I was 30 minutes late, so I missed Angela. Although I have read her dissertation, so kind of up to speed. The takeaway for me is just a reminder to get out virtually or until we're able to do real life and talk to people, because there's so much that I'm processing, studying, working on the side, and it's not exactly a topic you talk about in polite company generally. So it's really a nice reminder that there are folks you actually can talk about it with and not constantly have to explain yourself or apologize. So thanks.
Well, thank you, Nathan. We talk only about that every day over here. Next up is Christie.
Yeah, hello.
Go ahead.
Again, thank you, Angela, for saving my life. And, you know, I just have to say I'm actually a very happy polymath because I now own it. And now that I own it and I think about it every day, life is amazing. That's all I have to say, because I can take all my multiple interests, combine them how I want. It's almost like a program. So it's phenomenal to be operating this way. It's not every day, but 90% of the time, and even through the pandemic. So I really thank you. And it's amazing to speak to more people like me tonight. So thank you.
Thank you, Christy. Glad to have you here. Next up is Moira, Jean, and Joel.
Thank you, Angela, for putting a name to something that I never realized I had as a trait, and what other people were reflecting back to me as an annoying thing. And like, it's made me so happy tonight to talk to other polymaths in these breakout rooms. I feel kind of validated, and also, you know, was able to have a laugh about some of the strains of trying to find your crew, find your tribe. And it's just been really great. You know, you have an identity that's separate to Polymath, because really I'd never had a word for it until today. In fact, I didn't even recognize it as being a trait. I just thought it was just a behavior that I had. So it's been fascinating and fun, and I feel really happy.
Great.
Thank you, Moira. Next up is Joel, Jean, and Stefan. Joel, go ahead.
Which Joel?
You,
Okay.
the Darwin Joel.
Okay. Thank you very much. This was really great, and I'm so happy that I was able to stay up this late. My mom gave me special permission tonight. Just for bringing the word into sort of consciousness. I don't know whether I'm a polymath or not, and as always, the people that Shrikant attracts to these meetings, both in the meetup rooms and in the sessions at large. So I'm happy to be acquainted with this, and I'm sure, as you've recognized, more studies will be done on this, and eventually we'll have a firm definition of it.
Thank you, Joel. Next up is Jean, Stefan, and Joe.
Hi, yeah, so I'm just so glad I joined this meeting today. Actually, I was talking with the other Joe, said, you know, I can't join the meeting on the weekend because I really need to get some first-hand experience. After the Friday meeting, I realized. So, but then every time I come here, there's so fascinating information I just cannot miss. Anyway, I'm so glad to finally understand myself better. You know, the more we understand ourselves and the more understand the world, it's just such a fulfilling experience. You know, I share a lot of things other people here share. Like I have so many different friends from different circles. I have a mom group, have professional group, then have like artists, like drawing group, sports group. And lots of them are not interested in other things. You know, so you feel you have so many friends, but you don't see any of them really understand who you are. I understand you're thinking. I mentioned I read a poem the other day about how we need to draw a map of soul of ourselves. And we have to understand the world through reading the 12 rules, you know, study Carl Jung or meditation, you know, because it's such an information age, we get so lost, you know, and then we try at the same time have to keep the wheel running and keep the roof over our head. It's such overwhelming task. And I was sharing this poem, and my Facebook group, nobody is interested. I don't understand why they don't have the same dilemma I'm facing. So it's great to meet the people sharing the same concern. You know, if you share a dish I cook, I get tons of likes. But people don't really share your ideas. It's such a frustrating. That's why I keep coming back here. Just every time I come here, just fascinating, new ideas, new discoveries. Thanks so much for hosting this.
Thank you, Jean. It's always a pleasure to have you here. Wonderful. Thank you. Next up is Stefan, Joe, and Sharon. Stefan, go ahead.
I will candidly admit I just heard of this group and it looked like an interesting bunch of people. So I will definitely have to come back for some more of your sessions. Beyond that, I found it was interesting to find the different motivations people had for the polymathy. You know, some were a politer version of ADHD and some were just practical. If you want to get something done, how do you figure out what someone is telling you makes sense? If you have a range of experience, then Polymathy just lets you do so much more.
Thank you, Stefan. Next up is Joe, Sharon, and Kevin. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you to everyone on the panel this evening. Again, it was awesome. You know, I have three key takeaways. The one is the challenge of trusting your own curiosity as a learning experience. You know, it's often unstructured, but you really have to know if you're making progress in the area that you're actually, you know, focusing on in a particular moment in time. But I think the benefits are the biggest takeaway for me. The idea of authenticity and how that leads to a variety of friendships and incorporating, multiple frames of reference. Because if you're authentic with yourself, that's often something that is seen as a trustworthy act, and you're able to be open to others. And so I really think that that's a really huge benefit of being a polymath. And the third is that you have courage. I believe it was, I forget who was in my group, but had brought up the idea of courage to try new things and to fail, and which is critical in this process. So those are the three major takeaways that I have, and I really appreciate everybody's contributions this evening.
Thank you, Joe. Next up is Sharon, Kevin, and Carrie. Sharon, go ahead.
Hi. I guess I came in out of curiosity. I thought it was going to be a discussion of great polymaths like Da Vinci, etc. And so I was pleasantly surprised to find more of a suggestion of you too could be a polymath. But I don't think of myself as a polymath, but I do think that my grandfather, my mother's father, was a polymath. And this, if you'll recall, Angela was talking, there were two types of background. It could be someone who came from a very fortunate background, who had education, who had the stimulation around in their family and friends, or it could be someone who came from a deprived background. And my grandfather, very working class, very poor, Philadelphia of Italian American descent, but he came from nothing. He got his high school diploma by studying at home at night for the GED. And, but he was brilliant. He was self-taught brilliant. He was a wonderful musician. He would just pick up different musical instruments and teach himself how to play them. And he loved, at that time, now we're talking, my grandfather was a young man in the 1930s. He married somewhere around 1930 during the Depression. He was having his children in the 30s and 40s. And he thought, at that time, electronics, television and radio was the big thing. And so he would study, he would have in his basement, he'd have the oscilloscope and he'd have the diagrams and he'd study schematics about, he could repair televisions and radios. And that was, perhaps a parallel to our modern day computer science and programming. And, very good at chess master, self-taught. So it was just very nice to have the idea introduced to me that a polymath is not some distant great figure like an Einstein or, a Da Vinci, but it could be people right around you who would just develop these skills, and who people who came from, if not exactly dire poverty, at least, not affluent circumstances.
Thank you, Sharon.
That's all.
Thank you. And nice to see you here. Wonderful. Next up is Kevin. Carrie. Kevin, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Angela, for the great presentation. I missed the first part. And I subscribe your YouTube channel. Going to learn more. Yeah, definitely. I have one word suggestion for polymath. How about meta? That's possible from that, because polymath, after you learn something, later on, you want to apply the same skills for other area. And I find the benefit is, the takeaway for me is polymath, you can make new social skills, because you know more, you can connect to more people and more expertise. Mm-hmm. And I just learned the challenge. I thought the use of polymath is always benefit. I see Angela managing lots of challenges. That's I need a yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Next up is Carrie.
Hey, this is Carrie. I guess my biggest takeaways include I enjoy listening to other people tell their stories. That's probably one of my favorite things. So I enjoyed hearing other people talk about their lives. And then also it's good for me to hear the positives of being a polymath. Sometimes it's just frustrating, and it's good just to have the reminders of the benefits of our brains. So again, thank you, Angela, for presenting, and thanks everybody for just sharing and talking openly.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thanks.
So my takeaway is that I actually don't like the term polymath, because I'm more along the lines of people like Carl Jung or Buckminster Fuller or Louis Sullivan or Benjamin Franklin. All of these people simply regarded that this is being human. If you look at these fields and the narrow specialization, it's a relatively new phenomena. And to call what we are with reference to a very recent division of labor, I don't think does justice to who we are. So we are simply, I think the better name is human, because it is like being fully human, of being fully exercising your faculties. And it doesn't mean, and the great thing is that I'm not putting the modern civilization down. I think the modern civilization is fantastic, and it is based on division of labor. So division of labor is good. It has made possible tremendous prosperity. So we have incredible amount of leisure, which we've never had before. And we are able to connect to people all over the world like this, using the technology. All of that is made possible by modern science. And what it does is that it makes possible, actually, to be fully human, in the sense that now we have enough leisure, enough time to develop all of this. And that's simply, realizing our potential. Jung has a way of thinking about it. Bucky has a way of thinking about it. Louis Sullivan has a way of thinking about it. And all of it is very simple. It's what you see in a child. A child is a polymath. He's just developing, the child is developing its faculties, its curiosity with the world and wanting to do things with the world. And that's all I think it is. So I see it as being very, very simple, not particularly, so that's my approach to it. CJ, what's your takeaways?
Yes, I really enjoyed the energy and all the discussions, and the Q&A was very charged. This work Angela's doing is really important to a lot of people. And I like the idea of having a lot of synonyms. As I'm writing, trying to write an essay for each of my monthly presentations, you need a lot of synonyms and a lot of perspectives and angles. And this perspective and angle that Angela brings, this idea of what is a modern day polymath? They're out there. What are they facing in our current context? Is a very wonderful and important, and the enthusiasm really shows how vital this is. But for me, comprehensivity and comprehensivism, this notion of almost a moral imperative that we need to break the bonds of over-specialization, being cogs in the wheel, working for the man. The moral imperative that to understand our worlds, we need to explore many subjects, because if you don't explore those other subjects that you haven't looked at, how can you know the one that you're in is meaningful? you need the context of other subjects. And to run our complex world, whether you use the model of a spaceship or an ecosystem, it requires such complexity of understanding. None of us can be a good citizen without a thorough comprehension of how the world works, which you cannot get from specialization. You need diversity, comprehensivity, polymathy. The names, we need synonyms so that we can look at it from multiple perspectives. And I'm so glad Angela gets the last word.
Yes, Angela.
Yeah, so some final thoughts for me. You know, why does this matter? Why should this matter? Why should you continue thinking about this? You know, like CJ said, in the complex world we live in, you know, 2020 is a great example. You know, in a world with complex, wicked, VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous problems, we need a variety of perspectives to solve the problems of our time. And the old school world for the past few centuries has said everyone needs to be specialists. And what that means is, in my mind, it puts us in jeopardy if all we have are specialists and we don't have people seeing the bigger picture and connecting the dots. So we need specialists and we need polymathic people in our organizations, in our governments, in our communities. And aside from dealing with problems, polymathic approaches can bring lots of good stuff too, lots of creativity and lots of innovation, and just make our world a better place. So it's good with dealing with problems. It's good for bringing good stuff to the table. And on a personal level, it's just a way of self-authoring your own life in an authentic, free, creative way, you know, rather than fitting someone else's stereotype of what, or expectations for what you should be. Shrikant, I want to get back to you and share. One of the people I interviewed said what you said exactly, by the way. She was like, it's not the polymaths that should require qualification. It's the monomaths that should require qualification. So I heard that from one of my participants as well, because this is a very natural human way of being that's been kind of taken out of us. You know, we've had some of our humanity kind of taken away from us for the sake of efficiency. And I think that, you know, and I want to say, CJ, it's great too. It's great to have lots of words, and it's great to have synonyms and different perspectives for sure. I guess the final thought I'd like to leave you guys with is, if you see value in this, which it sounds like you did, like I really felt a lot of enthusiasm. I felt like this resonated with so many of you. It felt to me like you believe this is important. So if that's true, then don't let this concept and this idea go on the back burner after tonight. Keep thinking about it. Keep talking about it. Spread awareness. Talk to other people about it at work, in your family, at Christmas time, at Thanksgiving. Talk about this, because we really need more awareness. It's such an important topic. It's going to make our world a better place, I believe, when we have more polymaths. So we need to spread awareness of it. So that will be my final thought, is talk more about polymathy.
Absolutely. And building up on that, you can talk here every Wednesday and most Sundays on this topic. And we are already, let me tell you what's coming up to just show you the kind of range of people who are coming. You know, Karen is going to be here next Wednesday, and she's going to be talking about art experience, of how the individual and society, how we can be true to ourselves and true to society at the same time, using art as a medium. I'm going to be talking about Carl Jung's psychological functions and how you can, you know, how they all map, you know, what different aspects of life do they bring to your repertoire. That's going to be this Sunday at 2:30. The one after that is on next Saturday after that. Sanjay is going to be talking about neuroscience, in application of neuroscience to psychology. After that, John Roth is going to be talking about the 4 cardinal Greek virtues and their expression in visual arts and mythology. So connecting up like stories and ethics and visual arts. Then CJ will be back talking about the role of the story Then we are going to have a session for everybody where everybody will get to share 5 minutes on whatever it is that they're exploring. And then I'm going to be talking about the Great Conversation and the Syntopicon of Mortimer Adler, which is compendium of all of Western corpus on every field, kind of analyzed and put together. So that's what is coming up. And but more than that, everybody who's here, who is interested in being a polymath, being a comprehensivist, talk to me and CJ. Okay, just message me, email me, or email CJ, and we would love to have you participate, not just as attendees, but as presenters and panelists. So there are many different kind of higher level of engagement. And the great thing about it is that the more you put out, the more you can take in. So I think, it's an open invitation to everybody. So if you would like to do that, and it's wonderful to see all of you here. I'm always grateful to have this level of conversation, and particularly, CJ, it's always great working with you. And I think we have started something. I think we have got, very good. And finally, Angela, this was just great. I particularly loved your description of what a polymath feels like inside. That was the highlight for me for the evening.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure to be here, and just so rewarding for me to talk with people and to hear their enthusiasm and how it resonates with them. This is really great for me to.
And also one last thing, on our YouTube channel, 52 Living Ideas, there are, I think, 7 or 8 Comprehensivist Wednesdays presentations already. And this one will also go there. So visit it and see. Angela has a YouTube channel. Do you want to tell about your YouTube channel briefly?
Yeah, sure. I have a YouTube channel. It's called Polymaths with an apostrophe S place. I also have a Facebook group by the same name, Polymaths Place. And I put my email in the chat. It's angela@polymathsplace.com. No apostrophe in the email address if you'd like to keep in touch or learn more.
Wonderful. CJ, any last thoughts?
No, I look forward to next Wednesday. Karen Montanaro is going to have a wonderful presentation for us. We're going to break out into groups and explore it in depth. And I look forward to seeing you all then.
Wonderful. Good night, everybody. Thanks for coming. Bye.
Bye.